All right, everybody, welcome back to Scaling Smarter. I am Ollie Taylor from Wisdom and Wayfinder, joined by my co-host Frank Majorana from Just Works. How's it going today, Frank?
It's going great today, Ollie. How are you?
I'm doing well. This is my favorite. It's starting to be my favorite day of the week because we get to have these conversations and great guests like Glen Wilson from True Collab HR. Glen, welcome. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Frank, for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking today about moving from reactive to strategic HR for growing small businesses. I think a lot of small businesses start out with kind of handling HR themselves. They're trying to hire when they need someone. They're dealing with performance issues as they come up. And kind of hoping that good people are going to stick around. And then at some point, that reaction approach starts to limit their growth. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that conversation, Glen, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about you, your background, how you got started.
Thanks, Ollie. So I've spent the last 2.5 decades in the HR space, from recruiting, starting my career in recruiting, all the way up into building and scaling HR organizations for small to mid-size companies across the U.S. and a little internationally. And then really realized I liked variety, and I liked working for a lot of different clients. I would work in-house, I'd create a stable HR, and then go look for other things to do within the business. And now I really enjoy working fractionally with my company True Collab HR and serving clients across all kinds of different verticals from California to New York. And it gives us a lot of experience and exposure to different needs and transferable skills that we can bring to clients that may not have had that exposure through different industries and such. So look forward to speaking more about this experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just kind of starting out, Glen, you often hear the term strategic HR, right? We're going to be strategic and not reactive. Just for the folks out there, can you describe in your terms what you think a true strategic HR means?
So strategic HR, in my opinion, is where we are acting before there's a problem. Here's what reactive looks like to me, right? Reactive is we are putting out fires. Policies exist only after an incident. We don't have documented processes or SOPs for hiring, exits, reviews, performance development. And complaints go to whoever's available, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas on the strategic side, HR is more involved in looking at the forecasted headcount needs, not just backfills. HR is tied to where the business is going, not just where we've been and what the current problems are. HR is partnering and working with managers, not to be a manager, but to make managers more effective and multipliers in their role, providing them frameworks for coaching and feedback, supporting them. We're there at every life cycle of every touch point of the employee life cycle. And we have a consistent process to follow. And we're using data. We're not just using our gut. We're just not using a feeling in the room, but we're using engagement data and working with leaders so that they can see what's going on in the organization. How can we provide our employees a great experience? Because at the end of the day, every great customer experience starts first and foremost with a great employee experience. If your employee's smiling, your customer's going to be smiling. If your employee's miserable, your customer's going to be miserable at the end of the day.
So when you're looking at that and you're starting with a business owner, right? When does, a lot of times business owners are stuck in a situation where they're doing like, DIY HR, right?
Right.
They're themselves and 1 or 2 employees. And then they get to a point where there's, to your point, like there's a fire and they're like, all right, now I have to make HR a priority. If an employer is scaling smartly, when should they start that process of bringing someone like yourself in and starting to actually be looking at HR as a way of generating the culture they want?
I generally, when I come in, I start working with founders and business leaders. They wish we started sooner. 9 times out of 10, founders are really good. And if you look at the various articles and books out there that we've studied, we're always going to show founders are really good at identifying a market gap, identifying an opportunity to solve a problem, and coming up with a vision to solve that problem. It doesn't mean that founders are then ready to take that next jump and actually lead the entire business. A lot of times, it takes through funding and capital to then start finding who's going to be the COO, who's going to be the CEO, the CTO, and then the CHRO or HR. But I would say, when HR is 25% or more of that leader's day to day, and HR is not their main function, that should be a trigger. But I always say HR, at least fractional HR, can best serve a startup on day one. And why? Because it's on day one when that founder's making decisions that have downstream impacts that they oftentimes don't realize until year 3 or year 5, and they wish they didn't do it. And that's when they go and they make their first hire, and they're wheeling and dealing and making special deals, or maybe hiring a friend, and then they go make another hire. And this whole time, with every hire that you're making, we're not thinking about it because we're hiring them to solve a business problem. But at the same time, each hire is defining our culture. Each hire is defining a benefit, and we start to tailor them individually. And then all of a sudden, we have half a dozen people working with us with different arrangements and agreements. And then it starts to create, how do I manage this? And people then get envious or disappointed because they didn't have the same arrangement. And then how do we continue to hire people under a unified system? And that's where the conversation starts of, man, I wish I had somebody here day one who was independent and a third party, because a lot of times those founders are bringing in people they know, and there's relationships, and it's hard for them to say no or to negotiate with somebody who's really close to them. And that's where we can help. And that's where we can help offer that guidance. We can help be that negotiator, be that independent third party that tries to create a structure at that point that's scalable, that we don't have to undo down the road.
That's really, when you were talking about that, like having that impartial third party who can that you can bounce those ideas off of, because there are a lot of business owners when they're, like you said it perfectly, when they have tunnel vision in terms of they're hiring to solve a problem. It's almost like they're assembling a team of mercenaries without really thinking about the culture that's being created inside of that. And that creates like these different silos in terms of, well, this is my job, this is what I'm focused on. I don't really care if it how it impacts you. Like, I just got to make sure I get my piece done. And so, and then there's also the issue where sometimes the business owner might be, too nice, or they're hiring for people that are like them, but not necessarily complementary to them in terms of skill set or personality.
Oh, Glenn.
Oh, hold on. We lost your audio.
Nope.
I was about to give us the secret to the
universe.
There we go.
There we go. I'm sorry. Apologize about that.
That's okay. We have a joke that anytime somebody's audio or signal goes out, it's because you were about to drop like a universal truth.
You never know what that truth's going to be in the world of the HR side too.
This is where man came from. This is.
Absolutely. Oh man, I got distracted there on that. What point did we leave off on there? We were talking about the third party and the.
I was talking about how business owners, will hire based on who they like, but not necessarily who's complementary to them in terms of either skill set or personality.
and differences add so much value, and not hiring somebody that's like us, but actually hiring somebody that's different than us, hiring somebody who's going to think differently, who's going to challenge us. It's differences make the strongest company at the end of the day, and that's honestly why there's some great behavioral assessments out there for organizations to evaluate for that reason. Because one of the things we'll see and rapidly scaling companies, particularly when there isn't that strategic HR, is you could go in and look at different teams, and in a lot of cases, those teams will represent the leader, and they'll have very much groupthink going on because they'll have similar characteristics. If you compared those types of teams, though, against other teams that aren't homogenous, that have different views, that have different styles, it's the teams with the differences that usually succeed, that usually have higher performing success metrics at the end of the day, because they bring different views, they challenge each other, and they grow with each other. They're learning. It's not an echo chamber at the end of the day. So that is, and again, that's really hard to correct when you're 3 to 5 years into a business and you've hired a lot of folks. How do you move that around? And whose fault was that at the end of the day? And that's where that can become really frustrating for those leaders, because at that point they feel they feel frustrated with themselves. And then when they start to look at it, they're disappointed because now they feel like they've let down their team. Because how do we move these pieces around? How do we get them excited? How do we build up and make that team successful? Sometimes we have to move people into different teams and give them different opportunities and find better fits for them.
It's funny, Glenn, you bring up a point where, and Ali was talking about bringing in new folks, and you talk about, Ali and I talk a lot about value, mission, core values of an organization. A lot of times, because you're bringing different people in, what the owner says is the values of the organization or the mission of the organization is different than what's actually going on. If you are an owner and I feel like something's off, I feel like, let's say my core tenet is customer service and my customer service is lacking, or like what's the steps that you take to help organizations be like, all right, we're off here. Values are off here. Mm-hmm. We're gonna start. This is step one to starting to make those corrections.
So that's a great point, Frank. And I'm not interested in what we say. I'm not interested in what's written, and I'm not interested in what's on the wall. When that concern comes up, I'm always interested in what's happening right now. So hey, can I go sit with the team? Can I go see how they're interacting? Can I go watch? Because it's really what's actually happening, and then figuring out. The owner and the leader want X, and how does that compare to what's actually happening in the sales team, in the customer service, in the operations, and then seeing where that disconnect is. Oftentimes where that disconnect is, quite honestly, and this is where HR plays an important role, is after the hire and the offer letter was signed and executed. Because right after that, the next important stage is having a really well-defined onboarding program that ensures we are assimilating this employee, that we are educating them on our values, right? Because values aren't what's on a piece of paper. Values aren't what's on a plaque. If that's what we're doing it for, it's not the right thing. Values are actually what we're living and breathing every day. Values are what you see around the office in their actions at the end of the day. And that's what we 100%. Need to make sure people understand. And they see that. And we coach them on those things. That happens in the onboarding side. And then that's that part of the culture that's so important. And if you don't see this, say something, because that's how you build a purposeful culture, is making sure we set the expectations, but we also challenge people to, if you don't see it, raise your hand. If this isn't what we're doing, raise your hand. Hold us all accountable at the end of the day.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure anybody who's watching has had the horror story of, oh, we're like a family here. And it's like, what, the Manson family? Like, what are you talking about? This is, you see how toxic and combative some of these situations are. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Oh,
it has to be lived out.
I used to use that statement back in the day. I remember early in my career, I was still wet behind the ears, and it always sounded so good coming off of my tongue. We're just a family here. And it had good intentions, and I really felt that way. But I'll never forget, Reid Hoffman wrote a great LinkedIn article, and this must have been 15 years ago, on that point of like why we need to stop that term. And the fact of the matter was, here's the thing. We don't get to pick our family. We love them. We live with them. We deal with them. That's family. You know, friends and coworkers, we have options. We can choose.
Yes.
And your employees can choose. They can choose to come and stay here, or they can choose to leave and find other options. So we want to create an environment and be intentional about maintaining that environment to attract the talent that we believe is a right for our culture and for our organization. Because again, culture isn't about words, and culture isn't about just a playbook, which again, the playbook is good, but culture is impacted by each individual you add to the organization. Culture is a living, breathing thing that if you're not intentional about it, you're going to have a culture created on its own. And that's usually not the option you want. And it's not representative in your head. So it starts with, who are we hiring? How are we bringing them in? And how are we creating a space for people to hold us accountable to the culture we want? And I say we, because it's all of us from the leader down.
It's funny you say the we're family, right, piece, and I always think of like when I hear someone say that, I think they're using the wrong word. What they're trying to describe is they're trying to say, hey, we have a caring organization. Like where one person looks out for another, and to your point, like that's not what a business you should care. You should care. Good leaders care, right? We
should, or I think what's really replaced that too, Frank, and sometimes this is abused, but I think what's really replaced family is now what we hear as safe space. You know, we value individuality. We value people's opinions. We want people to be heard and seen. Doesn't mean that you're always going to get your way. Doesn't mean that everybody gets its way, right? But that's not the part of collaboration. That's not the part of negotiation. Collaboration and negotiation means that we all give and take. It means I give up something to get a little bit of something. Ali's going to give up something to get a little something in anything that we're working on together to benefit the business. And I think that's what we're really trying to say in present day.
Yeah. And if the great part is if there's that type of trust there, or there's a buy-in to that type of culture, you can have different points of view that will collide with one another that are going to help you grow. Help you get better, right? That tension, that tension can often leads to the best growth when people are when they're comfortable being open and honest and transparent about what's going on. That's when you can actually lead to actual growth. When people kind of keep everything to themselves.
I totally agree. And where the sticky point I think comes in all of this, I think all of those things sound really great. And they're all real easy to do. And even having the conversations with different perspectives, all really easy. I think where the sticking point ends up that I usually see, where I get involved in working with different individuals, leaders, managers, individual contributors, is once we get to the point of group consensus, that the group agrees, it means at that point, we as a group now all need to be 100%, 110% bought in.
Absolutely.
And we may not be 100% bought into this idea, but the group is. And so now it's really important to have a united front, that we go in and we give 110% of our effort, because we're working with colleagues who we trust in, who we believe in, because if not, then we have to ask other questions. But then we go out and we put 110% to move this effort forward. And if it doesn't work, and if something happens, that doesn't mean that we get a right to say, I told you so. It means we get to come back to the table and re-diagnose and share our perspectives and reshape it.
Yeah, you kind of think of think of a football team, right? Like, we're not going to, you think of a play gets called in. I don't like this play. I'm not going to run this play. No, that's the play that's called. That's what we decided upon, and we have to execute it to the best of our ability, right? Yep. So that's important. What's the?
But how much of that is based on the ability of the leader, the business owner, to sort of communicate that vision and say like, hey, look, this is where we're going. Like, even if you don't necessarily agree with the decision that's being made, you support the person that's making it. And like, how much of that depends on, one, their ability to communicate that, but then two, to be able to take accountability and responsibility and own up if it doesn't work.
Right. And it's huge, Ali, right? And so, because there's a couple of different leaders out there, right? And there's leaders who are like, hey, when the team succeeds, the leader succeeds. There's other leaders that when the team succeeds, it's all the glory goes back to the team. And it's and then, you know, when something goes wrong, it's not the team failed, the leader takes it. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take that one. Let's go back, because they want the team to keep pushing new ideas. I think when we have different when we have different styles in the room, different behavior patterns in the room, different mindsets in the room, we have to also recognize that we have some people in the room who are willing to flick the rock regardless. They're just going to flick the rock, and they don't care. Let's see what happens. We're going to have other people in the room who are going to process it and think about it and need a moment before they can commit. They also might need some of that information before they even come into the meeting. I had to learn that the hard way. I was somebody who I can act, I can go, I can process, but I didn't work well with folks who needed time to process. So I realized, like, I wanted to work with these folks. I valued them. So what did I start doing? I started sending them information in advance. I started understanding what's our agenda and our purpose here. Let me send you my thoughts. Let me send you what I'm thinking, because I know that if I give this to you now, you're going to process this, and then you're going to come and we can actually start dialoguing and pushing and pulling, because you'll feel more comfortable. There's also going to be people who really have a struggle with the idea of failure. Even if they're told it's okay, just go out there, just find the limits, push it. But they live in the space of it's black or white, or I want perfection all the time, versus not being comfortable with celebrating failure. Oh, I learned something there. Okay, cool. Let's go back and try this a different way and see what we get in the next one. That's where the leader understands the differences in the room and helps the folks through that. Helps that person who struggles with perfection saying, dude, I actually want you to go break something. I you know what? Go fail at something, and then let's come back and let's celebrate that. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you learned, because I that's where we're going to grow. That's how we're going to move to the next stage tomorrow. The leader too is also aware of the person who isn't speaking in the room. So I gave you a lot of other personality types there. There's also the personality of the person who's quiet, the person who doesn't speak up. They're just not naturally that extrovert. They're more reserved. The leader goes around the room and makes sure that they create space for every person to have a voice, so that we don't lose out on those opinions. Even if they have to develop them over time and catch up with them outside that meeting, and then encourage them to, again, come prepared or create a different environment for them to speak up. That's the leader who makes sure that they're hearing everybody and supporting everybody in their different styles.
Yeah. Wow. That's so that I can only imagine.
It's easy to say. It's hard to practice. Yeah. And that's where, like, wow, where can fractional HR play a role? That's why in day one, it can play a role. And that's why the power of fractional HR is so wonderful, because I'm going to be honest with you, like, generally you don't need full-time HR. You don't need it in that beginning scaling time, but you could use it to help put some foundations in place. You can use it to take some of the day-to-day distractions off the leader's plate, so they can keep doing what they need to do in driving the mission and vision and driving forward on the capital side. Because again, like, that's usually the focus early on, is continuing to move forward to the capital and getting this idea off the ground. But they can't do it all effectively.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like they could, someone doesn't even need employees right away to be able to work with someone like you. Like, if I intend to have employees at some point, right, someday I intend to hire, I could still have a conversation with you to at least sort of set the foundation of, like, what do I want these things to look like?
Oh, Ali, that would be the ideal state. Not oh God, it would be. I was working with a client not too long ago, and I love them, and they know I love them. I actually helped them scale from 0 to 200 and bring in an HR director full time to run their multi-state operation. But I'll never forget when we got started. Our engagement started, and they already had offers out to new hires, but we hadn't had a payroll system in place, and we didn't have any of our state enrollments done. Like, we were scrambling, like the horse was so far, the cart was so far in front of the horse. We were catching up. We were getting there. But again, those were conversations we could have had and like planned it. Like, that's where we love to play with founders.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, those types of conversations, I don't even care about having a contract in place. Honestly, like, you know, that's not even billable work. That's like kind of like, just give me a soapbox and let's chat and let's talk. Like, how can I help you think about, hey, because here's what's happened, right? Everybody thinks work anywhere was a great idea, and COVID kind of squashed a lot of those boundaries and barriers about you know, where you needed to be, but so many leaders were not prepared for the different impacts of being in different states and how state laws vary and the regulations vary. And then that opens up the question of, well, if you're going to have a multi-state operation, are you going to go with the richest regulations from the state that you're in, or are you going to have different appendices and different policies based on the state and their specific regulations? And then how does that impact your insurance? How does that impact your other coverages? So just having some of that in the back of their head and thinking, how do we want to shape the scalability of this? What's some of those strategics? I think a day one conversation just allows them to have a sounding board on what to be prepared for.
And even from the interviewing process, when you're hiring your first employee, like we talked about this a while back, Ali, but like when you talk about culture and you talk about who you are, that has to be woven into the questions you're asking. Like when you're asking, you want an employee that's going to demonstrate a hard work ethic or grit or whatever it may be. Those are questions that need to be asked during the interview. It's not just whether this person has this particular skill or not, right?
100%. And there's a line of thought out there of, well, just, you know, hire from the gut. And I will say this, I believe gut instinct plays a role in interviewing, and good leaders and good hiring managers use their gut. But it's a data point. They also like gut for interviews to be truly successful and effective. You use your gut with a structured approach. Like, you know your questions. You go in prepared. You know before you even have, and this is a lot of times what doesn't happen in early organizations. Before you even have the interview, having a well-defined job description, because a lot of times we're not even putting out a job description. We're going through our Rolodex. We're going through people we think could do this job or want to do it because we know them. But here's the thing, and I think Frank, you and I've talked about this from a sales perspective. You know, we often don't think about the business opportunities with the people that are closest to us in our networks. But at the same time, from a founder hiring perspective, we don't think about the people that are closest to us at how they would operate in a work environment. We know them from a social setting and in how we know them outside of work, and that they present themselves as really intellectual and smart, and we know high level of their capabilities. We've never really seen them operate in a work, but we make a decision leaving out how have they operated in their prior work environments? What have they done well? Where have they stumbled? And how would that translate to what I'm building here?
Yep. 100%. 100%. It is like you're scaling, when you're scaling a business and you want to do it as quickly as possible, right? And you're going to go with those guys' instincts, but you have to be prepared. It was funny. We were talking with 𝘁𝗶𝘀. It was an attorney over at 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀. A good friend of ours, and one of the things she talked about was like operational agreements, right? And the fact that you should have your operational agreements and that stuff in place while things are good, when you're forming everything, when you just start the relationship,
why you like each other,
why you like each other, and This conversation kind of reminds me a bit of that, right? You want to have your HR processes, my hiring processes, my things in place before, kind of, things get hairy or things get difficult, right? Because you want to have that structure. You want to have that direction.
It changes the conversation. Because if you think about it, in both instances, it changes the conversation, and I'll focus on it from the employee perspective. If I have defined the job description, then I am one step closer to setting my expectations and clarifying expectations. And I recently put out a post not too long ago that said, accountability establishing accountability isn't about having a strong arm. It isn't about muscling people. It's about communicating clear expectations. So you have to define your expectations and then communicate them and then share when somebody isn't living up to those communications. So there's a whole process there that we have to follow. If we wait to do that after the fact, when it's not working out, and I'm not using this word in the legal sense, I'm using it loosely. It feels retaliatory. It feels argumentative. It feels like now you're judging me, and even though like I may have missed out on what the clear expectations were, but if we set them in the beginning, it's not retaliatory anymore, and it actually allows us to change the conversation. And I can't tell you how many times, and it makes me smile every time a leader goes in and has a difficult conversation when they think, oh God, this person's going to hate hearing this. And 9 times out of 10, they walk out of it and was like, Glenn, that was awesome. I'm like, what do you mean? They really appreciated knowing what was going on and how they can improve and do better. I'm like, go figure, because they want to figure. They want to be a part of this team. And most people, 90% of us, know what we do really well. We just don't know our blind spots. And if you don't help people with that, they're not going to know the blind spots. So lean into that side. And if you do, you're going to actually build champions at the end of the day, because they feel like you care about them. And you see how the conversation just changes so much differently if we started from the beginning of this and we move through it. Because listen, in a growing business, in any organization, there's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days. We're going to make mistakes. There's going to be long hours, and sometimes we're going to fall off of expectations. And we need to communicate that sooner rather than later. You don't wait 12 months or 6 months to give somebody feedback about expectations. You do it within the week. Ideally, you do it within the day, so that you guys can work on something. And somebody's like, "Thank you. I have context to that. I understand that now." Gotcha.
Yeah, I can tell you the last time that I that I had worked for somebody else, and I knew it was going to be the last time that I would ever work for somebody else, was in a situation where I had a performance review, and also when I had finally given my 2 weeks notice, it was like now they wanted to suddenly have all the conversations that we should have had, months and months ago, right? They wanted the feedback, they wanted me to share. Now they were suddenly interested in my opinion. It's like, well, no, I'm not going to give that to you now. Now when I'm walking out the door, like you should have cared, 6, 9, 10 months ago when I tried to communicate these things at the time that I tried to communicate them.
Agreed.
Well, it's kind of the difference, right? You look at performance review in the past, performance development, which is what you're talking about, Glenn. It's really what you're looking at, right? It's in the time today. We're looking forward. What are we going to do?
It's funny you say that, and I think I pushed back on this a little bit oddly when we were exchanging some emails and much. Often today you still see so much about performance management, and I have a harsh reaction to performance management. And I talk to folks about it. You can't manage performance. You can manage systems, and that's what you should manage. But you can't manage someone's performance. You can develop performance. You can develop people, and people want to be coached. People want to be led. People don't want to be managed. And so when I tend to look at that performance conversation from 2 pillars. When it becomes performance management, it means I'm talking about SOPs. It means I'm talking about systems. It means I'm talking about tools. Those are the things I can manage. When it comes to people, that means I'm talking about development, who they are today, the role they're in, and where they want to go. And what's the delta that we need to close there, and how can we help them? What's their responsibility? What's the leader's responsibility? And what's HR's responsibility in that role at times as well?
No, it's a great, like, it's so important. It's so important when you look at organizations and you're trying to develop a better performance optimization, or however you want to say it, like, get more out of the employees. What's the frequency that you recommend that they're doing one-on-ones, that they're doing stay interviews, that they're doing all of these other things that we talk about?
Right. All hot button topics, all great things. I am not a proponent of annual reviews. I talk to my clients about this on a regular basis. Annual reviews to me are usually counterproductive. And I've read a lot of annual reviews over the years. And here's my takeaway of annual reviews from my experience. I would get reviews from managers. I would read their annual review, and I could find almost word for word in multiple reviews the same sentence from the previous year's review. And I would go to the manager and I would say, this is the same exact sentence that we wrote last year. And they would look at me a little bit surprised, and I would show the other review, and I would say, so whose fault is this? Is it the employee's fault? Is it your fault? Is it my fault? Because nothing changed here. And I generally say it's my fault, because from an HR operational business perspective, because we didn't do anything there here to move the needle. Like, what was the game plan? What were the goals? What were the objectives? Because usually what happens with that review is it just goes off to the wayside. An annual review happens, it gets filed away, and it just becomes, we did something. I think at a minimum, reviews should be quarterly, because they should be interactive. They should be, what's gone well, and where do we want to go? And where we want to go can be two parts to this, right? Where we want to go is one, from the manager's perspective of ensuring expectations are aligned. So in areas where the manager and the employee aren't aligned, that's the opportunity of, all right, going forward next quarter, we're going to work on strengthening our alignment and getting to meets expectations, if not higher. And here's the game plan of how we're going to do this.
Yep.
The second pillar to that is employee and business driven. It's, where does the employee want to go? Where does the employee want to go with their career and growth with the business? And what's that? What can we do over the next quarter to develop new skills? Obviously, AI is the topic right now. We all should be playing with AI, and so when we're doing that on a quarterly basis, baking that into our one-on-ones, we have real-time feedback. We have real-time, what's your blocker? How's this going? By that way, we had that agreement that in meetings, you would come prepared with an agenda so that we could be efficient and optimized. And, again, this meeting, no agenda. Last meeting, no agenda. Can we work on that? Like, next meeting, day before, can you send me the agenda? Right? You're staying into in the weeds where you need to be in the weeds, and then high level to, hey, how are you working on that goal? How are you working on being able to work through difficult conversations with a client? Do you have any recent wins, or what was the most recent hurdle, and how can I help you?
Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I think feedback in itself, particularly a small bit, feedback is just, I don't care what it is. It's just having feedback and being able to tell people what's on your mind, because a lot of leaders will get frustrated, and in those conversations, I'll dig into them, and 9 times out of 10, both parties don't understand what that frustration is. They haven't sat down, they haven't talked through it, and it feels uncomfortable. But I work on, and I share this because I'm not a perfect human, and it's funny, again, where I'm at in my stage in my life. I wouldn't have felt this way 20 years ago, but today I've learned so much, even just through marriage counseling, and working with my wife on our relationship at times. Even, again, you have a family, growing kids, growing times, you all have different struggles. And one of the things I took away out of marriage counseling that I apply every day in my professional world is changing the dialogue of, rather than coming at somebody in an attacking way, start with how you feel. Don't assign blame. Don't assign feelings to other people. Start with, I feel. I feel disappointed. I feel frustrated. I feel upset because, and when you put it on yourself about how you feel based on an interaction or what somebody else has done, they become less defensive. And in fact, they become almost remorseful and seeing like, oh, I impacted this feeling on you. Let's dialogue about this. It opens them up to want to converse with you. It's a very small nuance that has huge impact. And I again, brings a smile to leaders' face, and it lights me up when I see it happen. It brings down barriers and allows us to work through a tough situation.
Glenn, I love that. I actually heard, I forget what book I had read that in, and they talked about that. But the other part of it too, which is really true, is someone can't argue about your feelings.
Right.
Like, I can't. You say I'm feeling this way. Can't be like, no, you're not. Like,
unless they hit you with the, I'm sorry you feel that way. But to that point, like there were a couple things that I was hearing. Like one, there's the in you can speak to this, Glenn. There's a balance between there's the person, the employee, but then there's the position that person is in, right?
Yes.
And so it's you're kind of balancing, like if you're frustrated with the expectation of either a result or an experience that didn't go the way that you were hoping, right? So it's like, yeah, I'm frustrated because this expectation or this measure was not met. Not necessarily saying, oh, I'm frustrated because you didn't do da-da-da-da-da. Right, like
right.
It's nuanced, and I'm not sure that I'm explaining it or speaking it correctly. But if you can pull out the nugget of
it's the foundational, like in today's world, right? Technology and honestly, this is a funny part too. I'll get into conversations and maybe like a first intro call or even a cold call with a prospect, and their first thought is, so what does your app do? And I'm like, no, we're not a product. We're not an app. We're a service. So like we're so hardwired right now from like tech evolution that everything's app. Everything's going to be a product. Everything's going to be on a phone. And a lot of HR can be done that way. It should. I vibe code at night regularly to try and take those tactical things out. But there's still very much a human element to this. And despite all the technical evolution we're in, we often forget and skip the foundational things, Ali. That's what it comes back to. I have a client out in the Midwest. They got a great business. They're great individuals. They are the company I refer to who is the 35-year-old startup. They're still very nimble. They're still very lean. They kind of still have that startup mentality. When I joined them several years ago, they were the classic company where they just brought people on because you're nice. You're a nice guy. Hey, I would drink a beer with you. I would hang out with you, Ali. Come on, come on board. Come on, dude. I'll find something. Frank, good guy. I'll find something for you. I'll find. We'll find something for you in the business to do. Come join us. Come hang out. Yeah. You're a good guy. I want to hang out with you. After several years of that, though, they had a lot of frustration because they had people in the business. People were on the bus, but now it was like, do we have a seat for them? And the seat they're in, is that the right seat for them? And by the way, what's the role and responsibilities? Oh yeah, we didn't do that. Yeah. And so now like business is completely turned around and every role is well defined. Everybody can go turn to a job description, multiple tiers of it. And all for like clarity, all to like it remove angst and anxiety, because here's the other side to that. It sounds like, oh man, this is a lot of work for me, the owner, to do, but don't forget about the potential anxiety your employees are living through because they don't know what their role, responsibilities, and expectations are. Foundational HR hasn't changed, and it won't. It's just like the abacus still has value in any basic accounting system. Any ERP, anything out there is still based on the fundamentals of the abacus.
Yep. No, so true. So true.
Yeah. Wow.
So, we're coming up we're coming up towards the end. I think that was a great comment, great point to make. Glenn, if you had this one type of parting thought or one thing you want to share that any small business owner that is scaling his or her business needs to know today, what would that be? And now
document each role. Document your role, and document each function of your departments to understand. Because as the founder, you think you can do it all, and you are, and you're working hard every day. But the people, I will truly say this, and here's the closing thought. As an entrepreneur myself, and having worked with entrepreneurs, I will say this: nobody is going to care as much about your business as you do. And with that said, they don't have the equity. You do. Even if you give a little bit of equity, you're always going to have the full equity share, and you should. It was your idea, your solution that you're bringing to market, and your capital behind it. With that said, these folks also can't be expected to work 80 hours a week every week unless we're truly comping them for that, which we're probably not. So we're going to have to build out functions that are scalable, that are reasonable, that people can execute successfully so that they can feel that they have a rewarding career. But remember, it's not their business. It's yours.
I love that. Absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Well, this was awesome conversation. Anytime someone gives me a soapbox to stand on, I love it. There's so much to get into about, you can talk about technology, you can talk about AI, you can talk about HRIS systems. They all play a critical role. Yeah. And I will say this, everybody take 10% of your week, play in AI. If you're not playing in AI, AI is not going to replace everybody. But AI is going to be in every aspect of everybody's job in some way.
Absolutely.
And HR can no longer say they're busy. We can no longer say we are busy because we have AI to take the busy work. So now HR needs to be measured on its human impact.
Yep. Love it. Love it.
Yeah, I would say, like, when you say play in AI, can you give like a specific starting point for people, so they're not just making flyers and headshots of themselves?
No one should be writing a job description from scratch. No one.
Okay.
And I tell this to my clients. They know. They know. Like, hey, listen, I'm using AI. I've even gotten the one client I said that we did all of their jobs. I said to them, hey, give me a couple. And I showed them to them. Like, wow, how'd you do that? AI. And now they embrace AI. They work side by side with me in AI to do these tactical things, and we get it done.
Yeah.
For me, I try to figure out, hey, I want to be an HR firm. Like, I want this firm to be focused on HR. I try to take all the operational things I can do from like my LinkedIn outreach, my sales side, and I'll never replace a great sales guy, but wherever I can plug in some AI to help me manage that, I do that. Comparing documents. Think of the things that you're doing that are tactical on a daily basis, that are repetitive, that really aren't stretching your intellect or your strategic value. AI can solve that.
AI can. Great point. Great point. So where do they find you, Glenn? If someone's listening, they're like, he said everything that I need. Where do they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at TrueCollabHR.com. I'm not far away at all. Or your HR at TrueCollab.com. I'm there for you. Your HR at TrueCollabHR.com. So multiple opportunities at the end of the day.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to bring you back for another conversation, just because there's so many other places that we can dive into this, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation as the nature of work changes, as we talk. We get into like different generations, and how do you balance multiple generations within
don't get me started on generations. Don't get me started.
Again,
I hate labeling people. I'm still looking for longitudinal studies that show me the true difference in generations. I just think some of these, the newer generations are asking for things that the older generations wish they spoke up for, and have taken some initiative. I do think, though, looking at my kids, dude, these short clip videos. Oh my God, dude, like they're changing. They're changing the way. The attention span. So it's more of the technology that I think is shaping the kids, not like the generation in and of itself. I think the technological impact is really shaping the kids and the generations that are coming up.
That's a whole different conversation about, we have this technology, but we have not developed as humans.
No.
As much. Like, listen, it's been the last 50 years. It took us a long time to get where we are today. So
remember how big the world seemed when we were kids?
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge.
Absolutely.
And now it seems like nothing to our children because they can pull it up in the palm of their hand.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for the soapbox. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ali.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Take
care. And we'll see y'all next week.
Yep, next week.